Top-down mixing versus bottom-up mixing. This is the debate that's been raging in the audio engineering community for years in one form or another. On the one side, top-down mixers, they want to add processing to the mix bus from the get-go. And on the other side, we have the bottom-up mixers who want to add processing to the individual tracks first. So which side are you on? Personally, I'm a bottom-up mixer. Let's talk about top-down mixing. This approach involves adding processing to the mix bus first, and then moving on to the group level, and then finally moving on to the individual track level. By treating the whole track as a single entity, you get a more cohesive sound by blending all the different elements together as one. And if it's done right, this leads to less processing overall. However, this method has some potential drawbacks. What about bottom-up mixing? This approach involves starting with the individual tracks and processing each before then moving up to the next level, which is the group levels and then the mix bus. The theory goes that by addressing the technical issues in each individual track before moving on to the mix bus or the group level as a whole, you can create a more controlled mix that's more precise and it sounds better from the ground up. So let's delve deeper into some of the pros and cons of each method. The drawbacks of top-down mixing. You have less control over the individual elements of a mix when perhaps a more nuanced approach would better serve you. There's a risk of masking where some aspects of the blend start to overcome the other parts of the mix. It can also lead to over-processing. The broad processing that you're adding to the mix bus is then perhaps needing to be counteracted on the individual tracks. What are the advantages of top-down mixing? Well, it's faster because you're simultaneously processing groups and the mix bus first. It can allow you to establish a clear vision early on in the mix, therefore reducing the need for further processing on individual tracks. By applying processing across the entire mix, you can ensure that they're cohesive and that they work together. The drawbacks of bottom-up mixing. It's time-consuming. It can be very time-consuming to process individual tracks, especially if you've got a lot of tracks to work with. If you're not careful, it too can lead to over-processing them and making the mix sound artificial. It's also worth noting that it may not suit particular genres. Styles such as jazz and classical music lend themselves more to a holistic approach. The method may only produce a cohesive sound provided that the elements are mixed in the proper order. The advantages of bottom-up mixing. By processing each track individually, you can end up with a more nuanced and precise sound because you're taking that time to set them up for downstream processing. Arguably, you can get better phase coherence. By adjusting the individual tracks, you can avoid the problems that arise from broad stroke processing, provided you know how to address these on the individual track level first. Now, if you're fixing issues at a level that is higher than where they originate, I would classify that as top-down mixing. On the other hand, if you're addressing problems at the source before then moving on to the higher levels, I would call that bottom-up mixing. I prefer bottom-up mixing because it's like building a house from the ground up. You lay the foundation, you build the walls, you put the roof on, and then you add the finishing touches. It ensures that each step is done correctly before moving on. But this takes time. When I record a song, I'm thinking about how that recording is then going to get as close as possible to the mix that I envision. And that's a lot better than starting out with the intention that everything's going to be coming together in the mix or fixed in the mix. That never works. It's always better to fix a problem at the source than further upstream. In the end, it gives you a lot greater control over the end result. Just not immediately, but stick with it, and I promise you the payoff is worth it. A strictly top-down approach, in my opinion, is the band-aid solution or silver bullet for the attention-lacking engineer who just wants to get to the finish line as fast as possible. It's like going on a date and buying a wedding ring before you even meet your date. I think it's madness. Adding processing to tracks as a whole may affect tracks that don't need that processing. It's like adding ketchup to a steak. Sure, you might like ketchup on your steak, but what if it already is well seasoned? Say that you add a bunch of top end to your mix bus. That's fine if you're addressing the tracks that genuinely need that top end boost. But what about all of the other tracks that don't? What about Michael Brower's browerizing technique? Isn't that a form of top-down mixing? The thing about Michael is that he's always flexible and he's always evolving and changing to better serve the music. So while it might seem that he's strictly taking on a top-down mixing approach, you've got to take into account his years of experience and also the deep understanding that he has of the music that he's working on. Michael knows that running a compressor or an EQ or something like that, it's going to give him a specific result. He's already learned what sounds good and he can make those educated decisions. And therefore he can start with his preferred processing in place already. If it doesn't work, then he will switch gears. He'll revert everything back to the A bus instead of running through the A, B, C, D, E or whatever it is now. Same with Chad Blake. He has his mix bus preloaded with loads of different plugins.
I use a lot of plugins. I might not end up using all of this stuff, but it's there if I need it. I can get rid of it as I need it.
Without that relevant experience, it typically leads to weaker mixes overall. But don't get me wrong, it makes sense to use top-down mixing when all the tracks feeding that group need the same or similar amounts of processing. Just be sure to fix the individual tracks before they get there. In some cases, a hybrid approach allows for greater flexibility and can lead to a more polished and professional sounding mix. Ultimately, having a well-trained ear, that's probably more important than which approach you use. And if top-down mixing works for you, go for it. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and I shall see you in another video. Until then, happy mixing.